Oh, your neighbors must love you.
Yeah, not so much. Welcome back, Wackadoo Racing Channel, and welcome to part 7 of Motor Swap Turbo on Project Blitz. So today we're going to start working on fuel lines, and hopefully we're going to start laying out some of the wiring so we can get this thing all mocked up, and then we can pull that motor back out and get the engine bay all painted up. But we got to start with wiring and the fuel system. So we already kind of started on the fuel system, running those hoses and wires and everything last week, so we're going to go ahead and try and finish that up tonight and see how far we get. If this video gives you any ideas on your own project and gets you fired up to work on something, go ahead and consider subscribing at the end of the video, that little link that we pop up. Let's get working.
All right, I think it's time we talk about this list. So we've kind of been marking things off on the list as we go. Haven't done an update in a while, and I think we're going to actually maybe clean this thing up some. The rest of this is just small stuff. Buttons and switches. We're not doing the Skunk 2. Headlight hardware, that's a $3 piece. Water housing gasket, that's another one that's cheap and easy, pretty quick. And then for some of these parts, I got the hood marked over here for the L88 that we're looking to go with. So hood, gotta measure that, gotta buy that. Sway bars, I've got to source locally for those, so we can give that a quick little thing. Install turbo, done. Injectors, we have them. We'll do that after we pull the motor out. Same thing with clutch and flywheel.
Yeah, that'll actually happen.
Yeah, it'll happen after
the NA break-in.
After the NA break-in, we work out all the bugs. Then we'll deal with injectors, ECU, and then split loom, last kind of thing to clean everything up, make it all pretty. So I mean, we're kind of right there.
Specifics time. So here's a new list, kind of as it sits, just so you guys are aware of what we actually have to deal with. We're going to start with the elephant in the room. We need to pull the motor to do some of the stuff on this list and paint the engine bay. We need to get rid of the old motor because we keep tripping over it and it's in the friggin' way. But we need to install the wiring harness that we have already, so that goes under install. Valve cover, we already pulled it, so we have a new gasket, we're gonna go install that. Header gaskets, we need to go ahead and put new gaskets on. Water neck, new gaskets, fluids need to be changed. Turbo feed lines are gonna be a lot easier to get to with the motor out of the car because of where they're located, so we're just gonna wait until it's out. Fuel neck, we need to make that just because we're gonna relocate it on this car. Proper clamps, we promised earlier that we were gonna get the proper sized clamps for everything because it looked kind of shiesty. We're gonna hang the original factory tombstone gauges from the Miata on the dash with some zip ties just so we have readout until we can make everything work with the factory dash. We're going to do some new silicone lines for everything. Everything's kind of segregated by whether or not it's to be installed, made, or bought. We need to get the drive shaft on order. We've talked about that a few times, but it's not really a priority. Our guys have like a 2-day turnaround. They're very quick, very capable, so we're not going to worry about that. Clutch. We are going to be putting a Flying Miata Stage 1 in this car as soon as the motor comes out. Pedals. We haven't really done anything with that yet. That's one of those things that's also going to be easily done with the motor out of the way so we can have access to everything to weld in whatever we need to. A shifter. We need to buy a shifter to cut up a shifter. Somehow we lost it while moving everything around. We're going to bleed the brakes. The car is going to be much faster, so it seems like a logical step to bleed them while we're out. Throttle cable. I think we threw it away, or maybe cut it, or something, or maybe it's in a box. So we need to figure out where that is. This is to get it running. This is to get it driving. So the list is actually pretty small. We're going to see how much we can get done and how quickly.
All right, guys. Daniel, what do we got there, bud?
Well, we have a couple of fuel lines. Well, one fuel, one vacuum. Run down through our handmade grommet right here.
Handmade grommet, then it runs underneath.
All the way underneath the car.
Shake you underneath. And then up under the car, you see where it comes out. Runs up here along the underside of the cab. Next to the transmission. And then squeezes up to the underside where fuel pressure regulator is up there, right where we had it mounted on the back side of the firewall. So nice and tidy, everything's clean, we got room to move. I'll show you the rest. So the next mission is to get all of this emissions crap tucked in back here behind the battery where we got a big void space next to the fuel tank, which is actually kind of the OE position that it was in. So we'll pull the battery out, get this stuff put in, and try to get everything at least mock-up connected. That way we make sure we're good to go. If we need to make some rubber lines, we make some rubber lines and make it all work. Then we move on to greener pastures.
Okay, so now what we're doing is we have the original fuel lines Once you get to the tank side off of the hard line for the Miata fuel lines, these are a plastic hybrid line, and we're just using a heat gun to manipulate them slightly. They're pretty soft and malleable once you get them hot, so we're just putting them into a better position so we can get this fuel filter mounted down here. We're going to mount it kind of flat to where the bottom side of the original Opel tank would have been, and then we're going to save this space here where this mount is so we can try and put that emissions box there, and this is where we got our battery tray. So we're kind of up in this dead space here between the shock mount and the tail light, figuring out where to put the fuel filter and the charcoal box.
So tonight we were able to get the factory Miata fuel lines run from the fuel pressure regulator in the front of the car, as you can see right there. And those run all the way underneath the car along the trans tunnel, that way they're kept up off the ground. So in the back of the car here, now that we have everything mounted in, Dakota weaseled himself back here with a heat gun to heat these up, reform them away from the way they were in the Miata, got them to where they fit our needs a little better. We were able to use the factory evaporative emissions control, so that the charcoal canister is down there. We get the fuel filter tucked underneath the fuel tank, and again, these are all factory Miata parts, just massaged, reworked a little bit so that we can fit them in here.
So here's our tank, which this is all going to be covered with aluminum sheet. Our fuel outlet is basically under here.
Right about here, give or take.
Here
comes out that way.
Is the one for the factory Opel. The problem is the angle is so aggressive, it's going to be very difficult to get this to go back around here and straight down at this height and have any fuel flow. It's like trying to pump gas down at Donkey Kong level. So we need to basically come in over here and pump straight down into the tank. Insert Cody's new toy.
So what we did is I found a flush mount fuel cap that actually has a little T-locking mechanism in it, and then it just unscrews, and you have standard, or it's technically standard for a motorcycle, actually threaded in place and tight as that.
That's in the up position.
That's in the down position.
That's in the flush position.
And it's a weld-in bung that they have here. But we have a couple ways to maybe get around that and not weld in.
It might be a slick solution to make it so that we can maintain this guy. It's already molded into the wing, so it'd be kind of a pain to move this when this is already kind of formed in. So I think we're going to just kind of French this in somewhere, hide it.
Well, what it'll be is it'll just be a quick little bend in, just go straight down and in to catch the right angle. Puts it way closer to the fuel neck. It's just going to be less hassle all around.
We're going to circle back on that. It's not a high priority right now. That's one of those things where it's a quick fab project right before fire up. So we're going to ignore it, keep working on the wiring. So we'll come back to that. Maybe a little bit of input. But
yeah, I was excited.
Yeah, I was
excited.
It's a slick solution to kind of do a one faux, one real fuel thing. But anyway, that's enough for tonight. So we'll hit you guys again tomorrow now that we have a genuine plan on where some of that wiring's going to go, and we can hit it a little bit more aggressively tomorrow. Alright guys, Tuesday night, and look what Cody got. Ooh, look at that. That's sexy. First mock-up, got a Kirky seat. Looking pretty fresh. I think the second one of those is going to have to go in there. This one was just to make sure that it would fit, because we had a little bit of a fitment issue with the one in mine. So this one being a different model fits really well. There's actually plenty of room. So I think another one of those is going to be in order. You know what he didn't get? Was the rest of the wiring in the car. So we're going to start on that. But it's a little bit of an endeavor. What do you got going on?
I'm checking to make sure everything's got tags.
Looking for labels?
Yeah, making sure we're labeled. Kind of dash.
It says you're almost full. You don't need a beer.
Full of shit.
So we're gonna go ahead and try and get all this wiring looped out. We're gonna get laid out on the ground, get an idea where it's going before we start, and figure out where in this chassis it's gonna end up.
Yes, sir.
Let's look at this wiring.
Okay.
So this is front half. Rear half is already somewhat mocked into the car.
Kind of.
We're gonna go ahead and circle back on that a little bit later. There's two parts of the plug. This big plug segregates the two halves of the harness, if you will. It's actually more like 1/4 of the harness.
Close to that guy. Right there.
Splitting hairs. Anyway, it separates. There's a big pin that keeps them apart. But this kind of goes to the rear section.
So
where you have
this is
the fuel tank and everything.
Fuel tank here, and then connecting to this plug is what we already have run under the car, which is fuse box, alternator, and the main loom coming back for battery for power. So
battery lugs is the most important part of that. So it's power back and then power redistributed forward. So we've already got front to back and then back to front again. So it's a big kind of a horseshoe shape.
Yep, big horseshoe shape. We've got our little tombstone, our dash here. We've got ignition here, ECU there, and then everywhere you see a big grommet is where it goes through firewall. Goes through firewall there, and here goes through firewall, and everything's tagged. So driver side headlight bulb and cam sensors. So this is motor functionality, and then center console, engine fuse box, fuse assembly, and then this gets into the front end headlight stuff. So yeah, there's a lot.
And a lot of that on my car, what we did was we ended up hooking the motor up as it sat in the engine bay, and then I kind of ran the wires after I knew what had to be there because I cut everything off as we went. In this case, a lot of that got labeled, and we cut some of it, but not all of it. So I think we're going to end up in a situation where a lot of this stuff that doesn't need to be in car, we'll end up cutting the connector off, labeling it, and then taping it back into the harness in case we end up needing it later. We're not at the liberty to cut nearly as much stuff off with this one as we were with mine. It also resulted in mine being down for a week because I cut literally one wire I wasn't supposed to. So there's that.
We got the harness ran from alternator fuse box down under the car. It's kind of currently just dangling, but we can mount it all up into place. Not a problem. Got a hole cut in the backside. Battery over there, positive, negative. Tank. All of the plugs on the tank are hooked up, which leads us to the big main block that plugs into this section of the main block, which pushes everything to the front. So from here forward, everything goes basically under me, probably along this rocker panel, and it's going to come up into the dash, and then going to be tucked in behind the dash, push through the engine bay, push through the firewall.
We're basically motor, tank, back around and up, and then what's going to happen next is up, and it's going to go fender, motor, across dash, other fender.
Yep.
And that all looks like this spaghetti. It all makes a pretty good amount of sense, and it all has somewhere to go. We've already started looking at some of the spots where we're going to be able to narrow down some of that wiring because it doesn't need to be there. Things that are silly like electric windows and electric seats and dome lighting, things of that nature that don't need to be there. So we're going to end up narrowing down a lot of that wiring as we go. But for now, we're just going to try and get it in place so we can hang the wiring on the motor and test fire it once everything's back installed, and then see if everything works, and then we can steadily start nicking the wiring back.
Right, because fortunately and unfortunately, we shoved so much stuff into the engine bay that punching through is going to be difficult with everything still in there. So we might get to a point where everything is kind of under the dash in the location it needs to be. Then we look at taking all the accessories off, getting the motor pulled, get everything moved, punch holes where you need to go so we can route everything and hang it in the engine bay, paint everything, grommet everything, and then swing motor back in and try to fire it.
A serious order of operations type conundrum.
Yeah, very
where
much so.
It'd be a lot easier if we just hang everything on the engine bay and fire it up like we did in my car on account of my flip-up hood He's actually going to go through the engine bay. So kind of trying to figure out what's the best route so we can make everything as cleanly as possible and minimize the amount of times the motor and wiring has to go in and out of the car.
And
so
then all this stuff here, if it wasn't there, it would be way easier. We'd have so much room. It's here. There's no excuses now. So we're running it. We're gonna do it, but it's gonna cause an extra step where we're gonna have to have the motor out to kind of finalize and button up some of the wiring as we swing it back into place. It's just an extra step that's gonna be a little tedious. That's all.
A lot of decisions to be made. The main thing that we're running into is that there's a couple of sensors that we have on my car that don't appear to be on this one, that might have already been deleted by a previous owner, since it was not a California car. It was a 49 state car. So kind of have to figure that out and go through it pretty slowly and methodically to figure out where we're sitting.
But it didn't have check engine lights.
And it ran pretty freaking good.
Really
so
well.
Don't look a gift horse in the mouse. Don't look a gift mouse in the horse.
Let's go.
So as we were talking about yesterday, it's going to be a pain to try and run this around the motor with how limited the space is around the motor. So we needed to pull the motor anyways so that we can finish up a bunch of stuff and clean the engine bay up and paint everything and smooth out all these cut edges and all that good jazz. So while the motor is out so we can do all that stuff, we'll go ahead and run the wiring through, and then we'll leave it loose but in the engine bay. That way we can swing the motor back in all pretty and nice.
Just to give you a little recap of what we got done, we obviously got some of the wiring done. We got the fuel lines run all the way to the back to the tank. Tank is in, but it's not complete. I got to finish a couple things there, button that up. Now that the motor's out, we've got some stuff we got to deal with. The clutch flywheel is going to get replaced, so we'll do that while it's hanging. Got gaskets that we need to get, and some other tedious little stuff that needs to be done on this. Some cleanup, some painting, and then that'll also give us a chance while this is out start making some of these patch panels for the holes we cut, start buttoning some of that stuff up. We got tabs that need to be cut off completely. We got to button up all the wiring, figure out where we can start punching through for our actual engine wiring. So there's a lot of tedious stuff that just needs to be finished and finalized.
I'm looking forward to cleaning that up because I don't think any of us have gotten away unscathed and not gotten bit by that thing.
Yeah, no, there's some chunks missing. Definitely. Yeah, we got some cleanup kits, so some vacuum lines, add a nice little touch to the motor, and there's a lot of little stuff that needs to be done. We got everything about 80%, I'd say, as we were mocking everything up. So now we just need to get all these little detailed things throughout the car up to about 95-100%.
A lot of that stuff that's going to be really tedious, like we were talking about previously, like before we install the piping for the intercooler, which we're going to pull the intercooler as well so we can paint the logo on the front, and all that piping has to be polished before it goes in because it's going to get really hard to get to once everything is installed. So we're going to polish all the piping, and even that is, it's just one more thing that does take time away from all this fast moving stuff like dropping in motors and pipes and stuff.
Yeah, so a lot still left to do, but we'll start working on some of this other little stuff and getting it all knocked out in a line so that we're good to go for probably next week. Get a good hard push through next week as far as getting some of this stuff in, getting everything cleaned up. I think so.
I'm gonna get his ass over here at 6 in the morning on Saturday.
I had already planned on it, but whatever. That's cool.
All day.
Yeah.
For you. But for now, I'm calling her tonight so I can edit this thing.
Yep.
What I can do out.